Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice lunch. We're ready to proceed. Let's begin.
Thanks, Judge. Darrisaw, I think we left off. We were talking about the head and the scalp. Okay.
That's correct.
This right here that we're looking at is just what do we see when we're looking here?
This is a photograph. I'm not sure which ear because it's such a close-up photograph. Probably the left that we've seen already. You can see the injury on the ear, on the upper part of the ear, and then on the internal surface of the ear, we see some red, purple bruising on the inside surface of the ear.
What types of things could cause that kind of bruising?
These types of bruises you may actually see because of significant head trauma that affects the side of the scalp. Other things that may cause this would be very direct forceful impact that involves the ear itself, like a hard slap to the ear. You may have the bruising being manifested on the inside portion. And then a third option would be just direct impact into the ear itself, poking something right into the ear. So there are a few options.
I'm going to show you states 411. And in states 411, what are we looking at?
This is a top view of the scalp. We're seeing here a better photograph that's showing some of these pink color, the bruises here, more abrasions that we've seen in another photograph, but you really get in a field here looking at this entire area, but several injuries here. And this is what I noticed when I was parting the hair, seeing a lot of discoloration, abrasions, and bruises, and just then shave the entire hair so we can see all of this, because that is what the autopsy requires, is to document all the injuries that were identified.
Now, how likely is it that people injure the top of their head like this? Is this one of the areas that people commonly fall onto when they fall?
Well, you don't commonly fall onto the top of your head, of course. But these are blunt impact injuries. It would require a direct impact to those areas. So if there's some scenario provided an impact to the top of the head, that would be how it would occur. But of course, this is not, again, we talked about common areas of injuries, and particularly children of this age and their activities of daily living and the type of play that they do, they don't injure the top of their head.
Now, what about jumping on a bunk bed and kind of hitting the top bunk? Is that something that might be able to cause some of the injuries that we're looking at?
Yeah, again, yeah, if you have a scenario where there is some impact to the top of your head, yes, you could get a bruise.
Would you expect to see the number of bruises and lacerations that we see from jumping on the bed and hitting your head?
Abrasions. I don't see lacerations on her. She has bruises and abrasions. But in this particular case, I mean, we've seen not only this picture, but we've seen the picture of the side of her face where her scalp. There are injuries on the side of her scalp, the top, the back. These are too many injuries on her entire scalp to account for jumping in the bed and hitting the top bunk.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the bruises and abrasions that we're seeing are all over the head, correct?
Yes, yes, there
I'll show you
are a number of bruises involved in her scalp.
Sure, I'll show you states 412. Is this another view of her head?
Yes, sir. This is now the right side. There are several. You can see several circular red bruises. Then the abrasions, the bruise we saw on the back of the scalp already.
And I think that bruise we saw on the back of the scalp, we'll be looking at that states 413.
That's correct. In the center of the back, along the right side.
Now, from looking at some of the abrasions that we've seen, can you tell anything about the age of those abrasions? And I can put up any pictures that you'd like.
The only thing one can say about abrasions with age, they're a little bit different from bruises. When I talked about being able to get an idea of bruises and the things that we can do as pathologists to cut into a bruise or look at it under the microscope, the abrasion is really just simply a naked eye thing. And the only thing you can say about an abrasion is if it's fresh, did it just occur, or does it look like it's healing? So I mentioned abrasion, like when you skin your knee, fall on something, your elbow. We can all see that when it first happens, and then as it gets older, and then that time frame can be very quick, that it starts to form a scab. So that's really the only thing you can say about an abrasion. If it's starting to form a scab, and if it looks very fresh, where the skin has just been superficially removed. And some of these abrasions do have the appearance of starting to scab over. The other thing, as abrasions get older, of course, everyone here kind of recognizes too how the edges start to become white as they heal more and the tissue starts to heal. Some of her abrasions are looking like they're much older than very recently. And those are some that we see on her face.
Okay. And would stage 417, is that what you were, is this one, some of the ones you were talking about with abrasions that look older?
That's correct. I don't know if you can get it in focus better.
Let's try it.
Like this one looks like an older abrasion. Again, if you just think about yourself when you have abrasions, when you skin yourself, it goes through that normal progression of becoming a scab. The scab may get brown. Abrasion frequently will become injured again. You know, either people pick them or they rub against them. But as they get older and they're undisturbed, the edges of them become white with scar tissue. And that's what we're seeing in this photograph. The abrasion itself is really faint, red-pink now. It's really starting to heal well. There's some white edges, and so this is an older abrasion.
When you say older, is there any way to tell the amount of time?
Not really, like I say, with the abrasions, it's quite imprecise to talk about the time frame. Maybe a few days.
A few days.
Yes, sir.
This would this have occurred on the November 17th of 2015?
That's the day of death, right?
Correct.
No, sir.
Okay. And in this photograph, and I can bring it to you, do you actually see, not the one on the screen, the one I'm handing to you, do you see other signs of healing abrasions that might not be as apparent on the overhead screen?
Yes, in this photograph, there's the abrasion that we just looked at. There's another one that's just behind it and to the right of it. So there are actually two right here in this left frontal scalp area. And there are bruises around there as well.
Dr. Darrisaw, have you seen State's Exhibit 95?
I have seen that.
And did you note anything in State's Exhibit 95?
There appears to be an injury, again, on the left side of her face. And I see this abrasion at autopsy on the left side of her face in a general same location. So there appears to be the injury that I see at autopsy that's healing at this point in time.
I want to show you State's Exhibit 414. I can zoom back out. What are we looking at in State's 414?
This is Layla's right ear. This is the back of the right ear that you can see. There is an abrasion on the back of the right ear.
Now, when you conducted your report, did you make any notes about some of these abrasions and their relative stages of healing?
My report, when there's obvious indication that it looks like there's a scab or the scarring and the white margins, I note that an abrasion with features of healing. That's how I describe them in my report.
Okay. And did you make any descriptions for the central front scalp region? And if you need to, you can refer to your report.
I'm going to refer to my report for that. Based on what it looks like here, I likely said that it was an abrasion with features of healing. You have it in front of me. You tell me what number it is.
It's number.
Yes, my description of that is that there were abrasions with features of early healing. And then I In describing injuries, we also talk about size. So I've measured it, I've given it size, its color, and indicated that there were features of healing.
And what about number 4 for the right frontal scalp region? Did you make any findings as far as that?
Yes, I identified that as a 0.7 centimeter abrasion with features of early healing.
I'll take this one back from you. And you say, again, features of early healing, what are we talking about?
We're talking about what I just described. When you see indication of some scab formation, and you start seeing the borders being white.
And States 417 is back up on the screen now. Did you make any notes for this part of the body in position number 5 in your report?
Yes, sir.
And what were your findings?
My findings were that there were the abrasions on the frontal scalp, there were bruises, they were measured, the color is described. And you can see them in the photograph here. There's some green bruises on the above the ear, there's an abrasion there. So all of these, the process of the autopsy itself is to document injuries and then describe them and record them in an autopsy report.
Okay. And does this features of healing, does these appear to be different than features of early healing?
These are both have features of healing.
Okay.
One looks a little bit more fresh, you should say, than the other. This one does have features of healing. This one, with the white borders, appears to be a little bit older.
Now, Dr. Darrisaw, what are punch biopsies?
A punch biopsy is when one takes, myself as a pathologist at the time of autopsy, or a dermatologist, takes a small little circle of skin as a sample, then to look at that on the microscope.
Did you take?
It appears that I have a total of 19 of the 44 samples of tissue that I took total of the body that are skin samples of the various injuries. Now, one thing I will make note of is that for pathologists, some of my skin sections may need a small little circle, but as a pathologist, on certain parts of the body, I can take a bigger piece of skin and cut it off as like a small slice as opposed to just a punch biopsy. So there are 19 skin sections. Some of those would be small punch biopsies based upon where they are. They're near the face. We don't want to take a whole slice, a small slice.
Okay. And regarding some of the bruising that we've seen, doing these punch biopsies, can they give you any more information regarding the timing of the bruise?
Yes, that's the purpose of us taking samples of the skin when we see injuries on the skin in autopsy, is to look at them under the microscope and see what the body is doing to react to that. We talked about how the body will try to heal itself in that healing process. There are a number of healing processes that I can see in the microscope. I can see the cells that start coming in very early on to heal an area. Then I can see how the blood breaks down. I see very fresh blood initially, and then the blood starts breaking down over time. And when that happens, you see the iron pigment from the blood. You see inflammatory cells, and that gives us an idea of, well, how old is this? When did this occur?
And this is something that you're looking at microscopically?
Yes, this is looking at the samples of skin under the microscope.
And I just want to go over a little bit of terminology. What does acute mean in the forensic pathology world?
It means fresh, something that just happened.
And what about subacute?
Subacute would be something that happened recently. We can talk about subacute as recent, a day or two prior.
And what about chronic?
Chronic or remote injury is something that typically we may not start using remote until we're a few days out, 3 or 4 days, then we copy remote, and then anything beyond that. For instance, if you had fractured your arm a month ago, that was a remote injury, or a week ago.
Now, are you familiar with the term hemosiderin?
Yes.
And what is hemosiderin?
Hemosiderin is the breakdown products of blood. And so hemosiderin is, the composition of hemosiderin is iron. And we can see iron pigment under the microscope.
When do you start to see that under the microscope in relation to when the injury occurred?
As it relates to an injury, you typically, and then things may be different a little bit depending on where the injury is, but you tend to start seeing hemosiderin or the iron from the blood breakdown at about 48 to 78 hours after an injury. So 2 days that you start seeing the iron breaking down.
Now, on the back end, is there amount of time that you can say that hemosiderin stays around, or is that variable?
That's variable. Hemosiderin may stay around for just only several days in some organs or parts of the body, and other organs, it may stay around for weeks.
So, if you see microscopically hemosiderin, does that give us an indication that this injury occurred at least 48 hours before?
Yeah, I tend to think once you start looking at the microscope and you see an injury and there's iron pigment there already, it's in general at least 2 days old. It certainly didn't happen just an hour or two before because the blood is breaking down already. And it certainly didn't happen within the 24 hours. So it's generally at least 2 days.
Okay. And does the body make hemosiderin after death?
It does not.
Are you familiar with the term pigmented macrophages?
Yes, that's the same as hemosiderin.
Okay.
Those words are interchangeable.
And what about neutrophils?
Neutrophils are inflammatory cells. Once the body has either a disease or an injury, neutrophils are the first category of inflammatories that respond to the body. So the body has a number of different inflammatory cells. There are some that are the earliest ones to go and try to heal the body, and then there's another category that will show up later. So the neutrophils, they're the first, let's get there. Let's start trying to heal this part of the body. When they get there first, depending upon the injury, you may see neutrophils within about an hour. The most studied disease is heart disease, and typically neutrophils you start seeing in about 12 hours than a heart attack. But in some organs, you start seeing neutrophils within the first 4 hours. So they're very early on. You're going to start seeing them come first to try to heal the body.
So if you see neutrophils present, does that mean that at least an hour has passed since the injury?
At least from the literature and what I'm familiar with, the liver particularly is one where neutrophils are generally seen in about an hour. With bruises, the literature talks about seeing neutrophils in about 4 hours. But certainly when you see neutrophils, it's not something that just immediately happened because it takes them a while to circulate in the blood vessels and then get to the site of injury or disease.
Does the body produce neutrophils after death?
No, sir.
Did you do any microscopic examinations of from the head region?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and from the central parietal scalp, did you do any microscopic examinations?
Yes, in the central parietal scalp would be the top of the head.
And what were your findings when you did that particular microscopic examination?
Let me look at my report for that. So I did take a sample of the skin from the top of the head, and I did see iron pigment in that sample of the skin, so that would suggest that this was not an injury that had just occurred at the time of her death. It's been there for a while, 2 days, could be more because there's iron there. And I also saw some inflammatory cells. I described them as mixed, so that means there were some neutrophils and some lymphocytes that are older. They come later, I should say. So there's a mixture of inflammatory cells there. There's the breakdown of blood. So if she bumped the top of her head maybe a few days ago, could be a week ago.
Now, what about the left parietal scalp? Where is that, number one?
The parietal parts of the scalp takes up the bulk of the middle part of the scalp, and then you have the front and the back. So the left would be most of the left side of the scalp.
Were you able to make any determinations from that microscopic examination?
The left parietal scalp, I was not able to make any determinations, only because the sample that I submitted to look at the microscope, it was not oriented right. So when the lab actually made the sections for me, they were not optimal to evaluate.
Now, what about the central and right frontal scalp? Were you able to make any determinations as to the timing?
Primarily what I saw in the microscope with those bruises was just the blood. I didn't see any inflammatory cells, I didn't see iron, I didn't see any inflammation or inflammatory cells. I've already mentioned that. So this looked like more of an acute injury that happened pretty much on the day of her event, because the only thing that was there was the blood.
Now, what about the central occipital and posterior parietal scalp? Number one, tell us what that is, and then do you make any findings?
That's the back of the scalp. This sample that I have here would probably involve just most of that bruise that we saw on the back of her head. And that under the microscope, I did see some iron pigment. I saw a lot of fresh bleeding as well, too. So one thing that one should understand is that, of course, you can have an injury and then get another injury on top of an injury. So I did see iron pigment that obviously suggests that there was odor, but I saw a lot of fresh blood as well. So likely she had an old injury there and then got another bump to the head on top of that, because the amount of fresh blood that I saw did not account for the iron that I saw. Most of the fresh blood should not look as fresh as it did. So there probably was an old injury as well as a new injury.
What about the chin? Did you make any findings as far as the chin? And I'll show you State's Exhibit 420.
On the chin, the external surface, there is a bruise on the chin here. There's some areas of abrasion or scraping away of the skin on top of it. So this is a mixed bruise with abrasion. And I did take a small punch biopsy of that. And in this case, since it's on the person's face, you do only want to take just a little punch biopsy. You don't want to make a cut in the face. I looked at that under the microscope. I didn't get a lot of information from looking at that under the microscope. And some of this could be, sometimes when you take just a small little circle, you don't see what you expect. I didn't see a lot of the bleeding. I didn't see any inflammation or iron. But it's clearly a bruise, but even a lot of hemorrhage wasn't seen under the microscope in the small sample that I have.
Do any of the injuries that we've gone over associated with the head, or any of them, would any of them be related to the history that you have received in this particular case?
No, sir. The history I received and I talked about was a CTR-related event, and that included some back blows, Heimlich maneuver. Nothing described was described as impacting or striking the head.
I want to just kind of summarize. Did you see, as far as the evidence of blunt force trauma to the head, did you see evidence of that was acute, meaning less than, say, 24 hours?
Yes, I saw bruises and abrasions on the head, some of which appeared to be acute or fresh, and some that had features of healing, and some of the bruises looking older.
Did you see evidence of blunt force trauma to the head with that healing process that started putting it about maybe, say, 48 hours or more?
Yes, sir.
And what about evidence of blunt force trauma to the head that would have been perhaps even more advanced than that?
Potentially, maybe a few days. Yes, you could not reject that as an option that some of these may be a couple of days or a few days.
I want to move to the next area of the body. Did you make any findings associated with her neck?
Yes, sir, I did.
Showing you State's Exhibit 421. When you looked at States 421, what did you see that was of importance to your findings?
projecting well here, but what I saw on the neck, just to the right of the midline of the neck, was this large red mark. And then in addition to that, just below the neck, we see a lot of bruising on the upper chest and on the shoulder.
Now, we've talked about protected areas of the body. Is this one of those protected areas of the body?
Yes, the neck is a very protected area of the body.
Would you expect to see neck injuries from accident like this?
No, not typically, no. It would have to be something very direct where the neck is extended to have it in an unprotected state.
Okay. And did you conduct any of those microscopic examinations of this part of the body?
Yes, I did.
And what part was that?
I had a sample of the tissue from the front part of the neck, likely this red area.
And what were your findings?
Under the microscope didn't reveal any very significant findings. Not a lot of bleeding or inflammation or iron pigment.
Would this be, would you consider this an acute injury?
At this point in time, it's a red mark. I haven't described it as a bruise. I'm not really sure what it is, but when I reflected the scan and went on to the internal examination, one of the muscles in that area did have some bleeding into the muscle.
And what is that? What could that be indicative of, having bleeding?
That's concerning that there's at least some neck compression that caused bleeding internally on the muscle of the neck.
Now, did you also examine further down on the body to the torso?
Yes, sir.
Well, before we go there, if I could show you states 422. What did you see in states 422 that was of interest in your autopsy?
This is a photograph of the left side of the body. There are a number of bruises along the top part of the shoulder and the front part of the shoulder on into the upper chest.
And as far as the shoulder is concerned, is that a place that you normally see bruising from accident?
No, sir.
How about states 423?
This is also the left side of her body. Of course, I have her arm being held up, so we're looking at really the side, just beneath the armpit, and there's a bruise just below the armpit.
Yeah. And would this part of the body be considered the torso?
Yes, sir.
What does the torso consist of?
The torso is primarily just the trunk. It extends from the neck to the groin area on the front and to the butt on the back.
Did you?
That would all be considered the torso.
Okay. And as far as the torso is concerned, how many injuries did you make a note of during your autopsy?
From the external body, 11.
Let's stay up here with the chest area. Did you do a microscopic examination of the chest area?
Yes, sir.
And what were your findings from your microscopic examination?
My microscopic examination of the left chest area was, I did see some bleeding, and actually a prominent amount of bleeding in the muscles, as well as underneath the skin, and I saw some neutrophils. And we talked about neutrophils being the first type of cells to respond to the injury, but it takes them a little while to get there. And I did not see any iron pigment suggesting it was older. So the injuries, what I sampled on the chest looked to be relatively fresh, but then having maybe a few hours of aging to it. The body has started to respond to it already.
Okay. So this injury would not have been inflicted, say, 30 minutes before the time of death, correct?
That's correct.
Let's see. I'm going to show you states 424. What are we looking at in states 424 that was of interest?
This is a photograph of the lower part of the abdomen. Here's the navel right here. You can see Lots of bruises, one of which here on this side has some overlying abrasion. We're getting into the pubic area. Also, there has a lot of bruises distributed and multiple separate bruises throughout this area.
And did you do any on the, this is the left side of, this is more focused on the left side of the body, correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
And did you do any examination of any of these tissues microscopically?
Yes, I have some samples of skin from the left lower abdomen as well as the groin area.
Okay. And as far as the left lower abdomen, what were your findings as far as the acute versus not acute?
It appears here that the actual section and then in terms of how it was processed was not adequate to get a lot of information from it.
I'm going to show you states 425. What are we looking at in states 4? It's not, yeah, it's really not a, see if I can get it to zoom in better. All right. What are we looking at in states 425 that was of interest to your autopsy?
Well, of interest is, again, the number of injuries that we see involving the skin, the external surface. If you look at the right hip, there's a bruise on the right hip and an abrasion. There are a huge cluster of bruises in this right lower abdomen. We've seen this in the other picture. Number of bruises are extending over the pubic area. There's a bruise over the labia right here. So all this area has bruises that I then described and documented and provided a number to identify them.
Okay. Now we'll take those in sections. The bruises to her pubic region. Are those typically? Do you typically see those, or can you see those in an accident?
The type of accidents that one tends to see bruises in this area, think about gymnastics, either girls or boys that have gymnastics if they land on a balance beam or things like that, but they're directed impacts. And so the type of directed impacts in children are gymnastics type things or bicycles, landing on bicycle handles that hit there. So it would not be atypical to see bruises in this area in those type of scenarios.
States 426. I think this is another view of that abrasion that you had mentioned, correct?
Yes, sir. This is a bruise with a superimposed abrasion or abrasion on top of the bruise.
And what causes an abrasion, I guess, is the first question.
Yeah, we've talked about abrasion. It's when the skin scrapes against typically a firmer surface, maybe concrete when you fall down and skin your knee, maybe carpet, things like that. And it's an impact injury with the skin being scraped away. A bruise is an impact injury where the superficial skin layer is not scraped away, but the vessels underneath are injured and the blood comes out of the vessel.
Now, can an abrasion happen from being struck with something?
Yeah, something like some harder things, like if you get hit very hard with bilk, for instance, you may have a bruise and an abrasion. The superimpose, a combined injury of a bruise with an abrasion on top of it.
Doctor, we're looking at stage 425 again. If someone were doing the Heimlich maneuver, would you expect the Heimlich maneuver to be done down in the groin?
I would not.
And you also said when we were looking at stage 425 up here that we're looking at a cluster of bruises. Is
That's correct.
So that would be more than one?
That's correct.
Just to summarize, yeah, go ahead.
And so I should say is when I talk about my numbers, when I said I had a number of 22 injuries involving the head in that area, 11 of the torso area, that's not really just one number. Sometimes if there is a cluster, that may be one number in my report. So a number 4, for instance, may be a cluster of bruises here. So it's not meaning that I've counted each bruise. If they're all in one area, I may refer to them as a cluster or an aggregate, or one number may be, number 5 may be 10 separate bruises are in an area.
And just before we leave the torso area, I just wanted to summarize. You found evidence of blunt force trauma that was acute in the torso area, correct?
That's correct.
And you also found evidence of blunt force trauma that likely occurred prior to that day, correct?
Torso. No, I did not confirm injuries that occurred prior to that day in the torso, and that meaning that at least of the skin samples that I decided to select to look at under the microscope, I didn't have any that actually had iron pigment in it. I did have some that had neutrophils, which are pretty early responders that would be in the course of that day.
Okay.
And pretty early on, prior to her death.
All right. The pubic area, did you do any microscopic examinations of the pubic area?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what were your findings?
My findings in the pubic area was that I did see a lot of bleeding into the soft tissues. That means that, yes, of course, it's a bruise. So the microscopics confirmed that, yes, this is a bruise, there's a lot of bleeding there. I saw the bleeding extending very significantly into the deeper tissues and not just the superficial layers. That typically indicates a more significant amount of force applied to that bruise. And then I did see some inflammatory cells that were lymphocytes. And lymphocytes are inflammatory cells that show up after neutrophils. So they come later. So there's a little bit of age here. I don't see any hemocyanin there, so it probably is a day, not at least 2 days ago.
So so some of it appeared to be acute, meaning that day, and some perhaps a day or two older.
Yes, so I should correct that, yes. Not more than 2 days ago.
Okay. But the injuries that you saw in that region, there's evidence that they occurred at different times, correct?
That's correct.
I want to talk about the back area. Obviously, I think you talked about this already, that you examined the back as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you note anything specifically about the upper back and any findings that you had? And I think that's at number 8 in your report.
Well, first of all, we clearly note that the back has injuries extending from the top to the bottom. Again, this is one of the instances where all of these injuries on the back, I have in my report as one number. I have number 8, and I talk about all of this in one number. That even for us looking at just the naked eye, we see that these bruises some appear to be older than others. Some of them are quite red, and in the upper back, they're more yellow-brown. We can kind of be pretty confident, even without talking about looking at things under a microscope, that they have been sustained at different times, because it's all one area on this body on one person. So there are different colors of bruises. Here we see a lot of red bruising, but we see injuries that are really extensive on the back and of varying colors. It looks like some are fresh, some are old.
So in your professional opinion, all the bruising on the back did not occur at the same time, correct?
That's correct.
Now, what about the upper back specifically? Did you see any other signs on the upper back that you found of note?
Some of the injuries and bruises on the back had abrasion as well, so they were combined injuries of bruises and abrasion. And I noted that some of the abrasions had some scab formation, so there's some healing aspect to some of the abrasions.
Would you expect to see scab formation on an injury that was inflicted to Layla in the hours before her death?
Potentially. Abrasions are kind of interesting. You can start seeing scabs pretty early on in abrasions. It's not the most usual thing, but you can't discount having a scab starting to form very early. Usually the scabs form probably a lot later than immediately, however.
Now, as far as the microscopic examination that you did, I believe you said you did one, correct?
Yeah, the back was so injured, and it's quite apparent that these are various stages of healing. And with respect to all of the findings in the autopsy, particularly the significant internal findings, I took one sample of the back.
Okay. And what did you find in that sample?
In that particular sample, and my autopsy report doesn't actually identify, well, what part of the back did I take, so I don't know that. But likely what I do in cases like this is just try to get one of the injuries that looks more fresh, because those are the typical questions that arise, of the fresh injuries. And with the back section, I found just the bleeding, which is a fresh bruise, and I didn't see any inflammation or iron, which is a breakdown product of blood.
And as we look at this photograph, what section of the back would be the fresher area?
Well, the section of the back that would, just with the naked eye, would be the fresher area are those that look much redder, because there's a lot of fresh blood there. The brown colors and the yellow colors are older, and I previously talked about how everyone in this courtroom has probably had bruises before, and we kind of know the progression of color changes and bruises. So for me, my thought process is typically just when it's so many injuries like this, is to document that yes, something is fresh, because those are the typical pertinent questions. So I did document that the fresh bruise was fresh. There's no inflammation there, there's no hemocytin there. So I likely took this more redder area.
Now, is there anything that appears to be consistent with any sort of resuscitation attempts?
Well, of course, in the history provided, there's a history of giving back blows in a resuscitation event. Most back blows with resuscitation, obviously the expectation is that they're on the upper back. What we're seeing on the upper back, though, actually is more of the yellow-brown color. This looks like more older or aging bruises here. Most of all, the fresh appearing colors are lower. But if there are back blows that low, could they cause bruises like that? Yes, they can, but the other problem I have just in that story is that there's an extensive amount of bruises on the lower back. With a back blow, with CPR events, would you have this degree of bruising being that visible? Then that's kind of something that would have to be more thoroughly and objectively looked upon as to the validity of that story.
Okay. Now, what about the buttocks? Did you examine the buttocks region?
Yes, I did.
And I'm showing you what states 30. What did you note when you did the examination of the buttocks, both externally and internally?
Externally, on the buttock area, you can see lots of separate circular bruises pointed out here. One thing I mentioned is that sometimes the outside of the body may not really let you see everything that we can see when we reflect the skin. So I note all these on the external surface of the body, but then I also made cuts through the entire butt area and reflected the skin there, and I saw a lot more bleeding into the skin of the butt than I could see just on the surface.
And what kind of force does it take to cause that kind of bleeding that you saw?
Well, it certainly takes a great deal of impact to the butt to get it to bruise. The butt is typically the area where, if one believes in corporal punishment, it's where kids may get spanked on the butt very frequently. And very often when you spank kids on the butt, it usually doesn't leave a bruise. You may even hit very hard and still don't have a bruise. So the butt is typically very meaty. It has a lot of muscle there, the gluteus muscle. And so it requires some bit of force to hit a butt and actually cause a visible bruise.
Okay. And what about that deep muscular hemorrhage that you talked about? Was that significant to you as well?
Yeah, again, that kind of reflects when I talk about bruises and their size and their extent. The greater force, you tend to see greater outside appearance, and particularly on the inside, when you have all the bleeding into the muscles, into the deep butt muscle, that is significant to me as causing or having more force applied.
So did you do a microscopic examination of the buttocks region?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
And my findings there was significant bleeding into the superficial skin surface under the skin, as well as all of the muscles and blood intersecting within the muscle fibers of the butt muscle.
Did you note anything else microscopically that was of interest?
Yes, in addition to all of the extensive bleeding intersecting between the muscles, there were some neutrophil infiltrates as well. So there are some neutrophils responding to the site of injury already at this point in time.
So does that let us know that this is at least a few hours old?
Yes, sir.
Is that consistent with an injury being inflicted minutes before death?
No, sir.
Now, the extremities. Did you examine any of the extremities?
Yes, the extremities being the arms and legs, yes, I examined both arms and both legs.
Okay. And on the right arm, how many injuries did you note?
I itemized 7 injuries on the right arm.
And how many on the left?
5.
Were any of them more problematic than any others, or?
Most of the injuries that I itemized on the arms are generally smaller bruises. There were also a few abrasions that I also noted.
Okay. Now, did you test an area of the right arm?
I may have. Yes, I have a sample of the right arm as well as the right forearm, as well as the left forearm.
Okay. And what did the microscopic examination tell you?
The left forearm skin sample that I have showed a lot of bleeding into the soft tissues underneath the skin as well as the muscles of the arm. Additionally, I saw all the bleeding there. Understand though that I found a fracture of the left arm too, so there was a lot of bleeding likely around the fracture.
I want to show you what's being previously admitted as states 465. What are we looking at in states 465?
This represents how I indicated that the pathologist has more options than just looking at the outside of the body to talk about even timing or things of that nature. We have the option of making an incision or cutting the skin and then seeing what things look like underneath. So again, pulling your covers back on your bed, we can see, okay, what does it look like on the other side? And so we're looking at the arm. This looks like the left arm. The forearm, there's a cut here that I've made. And this is the normal color of the fat in the skin when you cut it. This is bleeding. So there's likely a bruise that I saw on this side. You can see the bleeding just underneath there. The other option, though, is that I may not see something on the outside that clearly. And that's why we can see bruises at autopsy that one may have not seen on the outside of the body. And that is the purpose of the autopsy. So here's a bruise here. I can see the bleeding in the soft tissues after I make a cut, as well as on the wrist right here. So that's one of the things that pathologists will do is make cuts in the skin, deflect the skin, and look at what it looks like on the opposite side.
Okay. And on the, did you find evidence of blunt force trauma when you, in the arms?
Yes, the bruises that I saw on the outer surface when I made the cuts in the skin, I did see the evidence of that on the other surface.
Did you also make any notes regarding the legs?
Yes.
And how many injuries did you note in the legs?
My report itemizes 9 injuries on the right leg and 8 on the left leg. And most of these were bruises. Some of them I describe as marks.
Now, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 440. Is this one of the injuries that you observed at autopsy?
Yes, this is the inner part of the right thigh. And here is this somewhat irregular shaped pattern of bruising. It's mostly red and purple. There's some abrasion along with it on top of it. So this is a bruise with abrasion. That's on the inner part of the thigh, right thigh.
And is this one of the injuries that you noted?
Yes, sir.
Microscopically, did you look at any of the injuries on the legs?
Microscopically, yes. I have a skin sample from the back of the right thigh, from the right leg and foot, and from the left thigh, and the lower part of the left leg.
Just going through these quickly. Not every single thing that you saw at autopsy may have been inflicted from abuse, correct?
That's correct.
And States 433, is something like this bruise right here, could that have been from, say, child's play?
Yes, so this would be when we talk about locations of injuries. Here is a smaller bruise on the front part of her leg. These are typical areas that kids have bruises on the front part of their legs.
I'm going to show you States 447. What are we looking at in States 447?
This is the inner, so this would be the left side. Here, the inner part of the left thigh has this bruise with abrasion. There's also actually, let's change that. I think the body is upside down. Let me see the picture.
Sure.
Because this is the injury that we just saw. So this is the right leg because the body's turned over. So this is an injury that we just saw, this very irregular pattern bruise with abrasion from the back side. It's on the inner side and extends to the back of the thigh. Also on the outer portion of this right thigh, there's a bruise.
And States 452. Is the bruise that we're looking at in this picture right here in the forefront, is that on the other leg from the one we just looked at?
Yes, so this is the left leg. You can see better in this picture that the body is laying on the front side. It's hip and knee, face down. This is the back of the left thigh. There's a bruise on the back of the left thigh.
Did you see evidence of blunt force trauma on Layla's legs?
Yes, the bruising is the evidence of blunt force trauma. A bruise is a blunt force injury category.
Doctor, you had mentioned previously that you had incised the scalp, and you kind of explained to us how you did that, correct?
Yes, I did.
All right. I want to go ahead and show you what's been previously marked as States 454. I'm going to show you a photograph of the incised scalp, okay? What are we looking at, if you can describe what we're looking at here?
What we're looking at here is after we've made a cut right along the top of the head from ear to ear, then of course the front part of the scalp is pulled forward, the back is pulled backwards. Again, this analogy of sheets going pulled back. And now we can see, this is the front of the head, this is the back of the head. We're seeing the inside surface of the front here to our left. All of this is, all this red areas, the scalp should look a little bit more like this, very tan gray color. We have a lot of yellow color here, that's abnormal. We've already seen that some of the bruises were older, and so that's why some of it is looking yellow. And then a lot of this red is fresh bleeding. It's rather extensive. This right here is a muscle of the temporal part of the scalp. It's called the temporalis muscle. So the bleeding is also into the muscle as well. That means that it's deeper than just the thickness of the skin.
I'm going to show you what's been entered as stage 455. What are we looking at in stage 455?
This is this same skin reflected area. So here's the cut line. So this means that this is on the middle. And as we go inside, this is the front. So the eyes would be right here. So this is the frontal scalp, the forehead would start above there, and this is going towards the top of the head. So, I mean, there's just numerous areas of bleeding on the scalp here. All of this it's in the middle, it's on the sides, it's deep enough to affect the muscles. So we're seeing the extent of the bleeding in her scalp that, if you remember looking at the outside doesn't look this bad. We don't really see all this on the outside. And so this is how you can see a lot more on the inside than you can see on the outside.
Now, how many areas did you note of hemorrhage when you incised the scalp?
Again, I categorize this as my incised scalp in terms of the area that I described. And I have 8 separate areas listed. I should say 8 separate numbers listed. But again, each number, some of this is just the area. It's not counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1 may be all of this. Number 2 may be, let's cluster these together. Number 3 may, so things are like, let's cluster number 1, as opposed to really being able to count every single isolated area because it's so extensive.
Now, the injury that you saw when you incised Layla's scalp, is that consistent with accidental trauma?
Well, no, not the extent of it. Most of this entirety of the front part of her scalp has numerous bruises. In the realm of even thinking about a 2-year-old and the type of things that happen to them from falling or bumping or the type of things they do. I mean, I have 4 children, so this is completely out of the realm of, oh, that's probably just from the 2-year-old falling down or jumping in the bed. These are outside the realm of being logically consistent with accidental trauma in a 2-year-old.
And you said that the different colors or hues let you know that these likely occurred at different times, correct?
Yeah, and then we've already talked about some of the samples that I already looked at in the microscope that confirmed that.
What type of mechanism could cause injury like this?
They're bruises, so they're blunt impact injuries. Impact to the scalp causes bruises of the scalp. And impacts, I'm sure everyone is kind of obvious. Impacts may be the stationary head being hit with something or the head in motion hitting something.
Doctor, we had talked a little bit about your internal examination. You did not find any signs of chicken anywhere in the body, correct?
No, the airway at the time of autopsy was a normal airway that did not have any foreign objects, whether that be food or any other objects in there.
Did you make a notation or did you observe any injury to the internal organs of the body?
Yes, I observed several injuries to internal organs.
Now, what is the thymus?
The thymus is an organ that sits right over the heart. When you first make an incision in the body and the chest, and remove the chest cavity, the thymus sits right over the heart.
And did you find any injury to the thymus?
I saw bleeding in the thymus, yes.
And what could that be consistent with?
Again, with bruises, we talked about bruises on the external surface of the body, but internal organs can also be bruised. And so when you have impacts that are forceful enough to injure the internal organs of the body, you see, again, the blood vessels have been disturbed and disrupted, and then the blood comes out of the vessel, and you see the bleeding into the tissues of the organ. And those are blunt force injuries.
Do you normally see that type of injury associated with CPR?
With the thymus, and as much as it does sit right over the heart, you can see some hemorrhage in the thymus with CPR because that is a impact when you're doing compressions. Typically with CPR, since it's being done to a person that is either near death or has, is very near death, the blood in the heart is not pumping very well, so you don't really see a lot of bleeding into the tissues. But I saw a significant amount of bleeding in the thymus.
Given the fact that you saw a significant amount of bleeding in the thymus, would that be consistent with CPR?
I would say it would be consistent with compressions in a person that does not have a very strong heartbeat.
What would it be more consistent with, say, being punched in the chest?
It could be consistent with being punched in the chest, yes, in a person who's not near death and their heart is beating well and they're alive and they've been punched in the chest.
I want to show you what. Well, let me ask you this: did you when you did the examination, did you extract any blood from Layla's abdomen?
When I did the examination, Layla had blood in her, free blood in her abdomen. That means that she was bleeding internally from injuries that were identified at autopsy, and I did collect that blood and I measured it.
I'm going to show you states 457. Is that the blood that you collected from Layla?
Yes, that's in a measuring cup, and it shows that there was 150 cc's of just free blood in the abdominal cavity.
And roughly how much would that have been of her blood from her body?
So for a child of this age and weight, she probably has about a liter of blood circulating in her body. 150, and that makes the math easy. It's about 50% of her, a liter is 1,000. This is 150. That's 50% of her blood volume is free in her abdominal cavity.
Did you make any findings regarding her liver?
Yes, I did. She had a liver laceration.
And tell us a little bit about how people can get liver lacerations.
You get liver lacerations with significant amount of blunt impact to the abdomen that then causes the liver to tear in certain areas. We see liver lacerations frequently in motor vehicle accidents, other injuries, significant forceful punches to the stomach area, or I should say abdomen, not necessarily stomach. That's when you see liver injuries. Impacts to the abdomen cause the liver to be injured.
And are there a lot of blood vessels in the abdomen? I'm
Yes,
sorry, the liver I meant.
Yes.
Okay.
The liver is a very vascular organ. It has two different sources of blood flow, and so it's quite vascular.
I'm going to show you what's admitted as states 464. What are we looking at in states 464?
This is a photograph now of the internal aspect of the autopsy. After all of the external is done, the injuries documented from the external, then to proceed with the internal examination, a Y-shaped incision is made in the chest and abdomen. The chest plate is removed. So here is the cut line along the ribs, just the orientation. This is the chest cavity. Right here in the middle is the heart. Off to the sides are the lungs. There's a diaphragm. This is the muscle that separates the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. And just underneath the diaphragm on the right side is the liver. And the liver takes up all of this upper part of the right side of the abdomen and extends over a little bit towards the left as well. Of course, the liver is an organ that's all one piece. And in this photograph, you can see the split, the cut, or the laceration, in medical words, in the liver. And that's where the injury is.
Now, did you see anything as far as did you do any microscopic examination?
Yes, sir, I did.
And when you did your microscopic examination, did it tell you anything else about any injuries to the liver?
Yes, it did.
And what did it tell you?
So interestingly, when I did the microscopic of the liver area where it was injured, I see a lot of the fresh blood. It's a fresh injury. Once something is injured, you're going to see the blood there. I saw neutrophils already. So that means that, okay, some neutrophils, the body's trying to heal itself already. So it didn't just happen like 10 minutes ago. The body, the neutrophils are coming in, they want to heal it. The liver tissue, I saw it dying already. That's called necrosis. I started seeing that. That takes a little bit of a time frame as well. The other thing I saw, though, in addition to all these acute injuries in other areas of ventricular liver, was evidence that the liver had been injured before. I saw some features of a healing of the liver tissue. I saw a lot of iron macrophages so I saw evidence that she previously had injury to the liver. And that, at least from all the historical information that I received, had never had any type of medical attention of the liver injury before. So this was an injury that had gone unseen by any medical doctors, but I identified, hey, this liver's been injured before. There's a lot of iron here. This starting to heal, which the body will do. And then I saw this very acute liver injury that accounted for the blood in the abdomen. It didn't happen 10, 15 minutes ago because the body is already ready to react to it. There's neutrophils there. The liver cells are dying. So she had evidence of an acute or fresh injury. And I previously mentioned maybe an hour, within maybe 40 minutes to a little over an hour. And then something old, maybe a few days old, a couple of weeks, maybe a week.
Okay. So for the liver, the liver injury, your microscopic examination showed it was probably about 40 minutes to an hour at least since that injury had been inflicted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say like within an hour, give or take a few, but then not really far beyond that. Because once you start going beyond an hour, 2, 3 hours, this is a person that then would have, with no medical attention, would have manifested the symptoms of the blood loss and things of that nature much sooner than that. So we're talking about an hour or so.
Now, you mentioned that the liver is very vascular. Did this contribute to the amount of blood that was free in Layla's abdomen?
Yes, absolutely.
You also mentioned the healing trauma. And let me ask you this, because you found what exactly did you find as far as the healing trauma?
I saw the iron pigment, the hemosiderin, a lot of that. And then I saw what we call fibrous type tissue starting to react. That's as things get older, when an organ starts to heal, you start having fibrous tissue reactive changes.
Now, how quickly do liver lacerations heal in general?
Well, the liver is quite an organ that just, particularly because of the blood supply that it has a very rich blood supply from 2 type of separate channels, and it regenerates itself very quickly. That's one of the characteristic features of a liver, it's really regenerative. And typically they're going to heal very quickly, more so than other organs in the body.
Okay, so because the macrophages are there, it would be at least 2 days old, is that correct?
It would be at least that. Yeah, everything that I saw in the previous liver injury, we're probably talking about several days, maybe a few weeks. Maybe.
Let me ask you on the back end, would you expect this injury to still be present or seen by you if it was, say, 3 to 4 months old?
Oh, no, sir. The liver would be well healed. You wouldn't be able to tell anything after 3 to 4 months, particularly in a 2-year-old. Even their bones are completely healed after much sooner than that. So the liver, I would expect to see that it would just look like a normal liver after probably a month. So a liver would look normal you would never be able to tell there was an injury before.
You mentioned something about kids healing. Do kids heal at different? Can children heal at different rates than say adults?
Yes, it's quite well recognized that children will heal quicker than adults.
Now, is the injury that you saw consistent with, say, getting punched in the stomach?
Which injury?
The liver laceration.
Yes.
Yes, the acute one.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a blunt force injury, being kicked or hit or something hitting, whatever, struck the abdomen, lacerated the liver.
Now, do you see liver injuries frequently in the context of child abuse?
Yes, in the context of inflicted trauma to children, yes. The most common type of injuries that you see in what we refer as child abuse is head trauma. Then abdominal trauma is the second most common, and with abdominal trauma, the liver is one of the organs that is frequently injured.
Now, did you also make any findings regard to Layla's pancreas?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to show you what's been admitted as states 459. What are we looking at in states 459?
For orientation purposes, here you can see the cut edges of the ribs as they extend down into the abdomen portion below the diaphragm. This is the liver up here. It's to our left here in the picture, but the liver sits up in the right. I held up the liver a bit. On the opposite side is the stomach, and I've held the stomach up because the pancreas is an elongated organ that sits somewhat right above the vertebrae, and it's behind the stomach, it's behind the liver, it stretches across there, and it's an organ that's one piece, it's one organ. So the pancreas kind of would extend right along here, from about here to there. This is one half of the pancreas, and this is the other half of the pancreas because it was injured and it was lacerated until it's separated into two pieces. And so we're seeing the separation of the injured pancreas. This is called a transection. That's the word that's used in my report, that the pancreas was transected, separated into two pieces.
Dr. Darrisaw, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as states exhibits 473, 474, and 475. Would these exhibits aid you in explaining some of the concepts we're talking about to the jury?
Yes. Probably it's best to kind of go in the order where you see it 474, then 75, and back to 73.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I'd move 473, 474, and 475 as evidence is demonstrative.
No objection.
Admitted.
Dr. Darrisaw, what are we looking at in states 474?
So this is a good diagram that shows where the organs are in the body if you look at them on the inside. Here's the liver. It sits up in the right upper part of the abdomen. The stomach sits in the left and it curves around. Here, coming from the top, the esophagus comes down, food comes into the stomach. The intestines take up the large amount of the abdomen. The large intestine kind of comes across like this. All of this is small intestine. The pancreas hides behind all this. This diagram is shown, obviously the stomach isn't see-through, but just for the purposes of showing this, it's behind it. And you can see it stretching across there. So in my previous picture that we just saw, I don't remember which exhibit number it was, of Layla, I had to hold the stomach up, because of course you can't see through it like here. I held it up, I held up the liver, then we could see the pancreas, and the pancreas should be one elongated organ. Layla's pancreas was split in two.
I'm showing you states 475. What are we looking at in states 475?
So in this diagram, it's like a cutaway of just seeing. Let's just look at where the pancreas is when we have everything cut away. The back of the body and the vertebrae would be there. In front of it, you see all these blood vessels. The kidneys are back here. The spleen sits over to the left side. And here's where the pancreas stretches across, and it kind of stretches across underneath stomach, liver, and it kind of stretches across right over the vertebrae. And so very forceful punches to the abdomen in that upper abdominal area. If there's a hard enough punch, since the pancreas is right there over the vertebrae, that's how it gets, that injury from punch from the inside and the vertebrae right there, and you can cause a laceration.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as States Exhibit 473. Does this diagram aid you in assisting how Layla got injured?
Yeah, so this is a diagram that shows that. This would be the back. Here's a vertebral body outline. This is the front of the body. So here's the liver. We see cut portions here demonstrating in the little cartoon the kidneys here. The pancreas stretches here. So in this diagram, they're showing the arrows representing a force coming into the abdomen. This force coming in along this line, it can lacerate the liver, it can lacerate the pancreas where it separates into two, because once all of this gets compressed, you're going to have this impact on the vertebrae right there. And so you're going to have to come very forcefully to impact that for all of this tissue to go internally and separate the pancreas, lacerate the liver.
Now, can the pancreas be injured in an accidental manner?
Yes, it can.
What's the most common way that it's injured in an accidental manner?
Most common accidents, particularly I'll talk about children, is bicycle handle injuries. And so with live children, the trauma surgeons or the ER physicians, they see the children that come in with abdominal pain, and once they do CTs and x-rays, they can see that a liver may be injured. And the typical story may be, oh, they're on a bicycle, maybe they fall, and that handlebar comes directly internally and hits in that particular place to lacerate the pancreas. So those are what you see typically in the literature. That's what the doctors in the hospital see, bicycle handle injuries.
Now, are pancreas injuries in and of themselves, are they normally fatal?
They're typically not normally fatal. If you look at the literature from trauma literature, emergency room doctors, trauma surgeons, most pancreas injuries, particularly when there are these bicycle injuries, they're isolated, only the pancreas is injured. The pancreas is it's not the most vascular organ in the abdominal cavity. It has a lot of enzymes and there will be pain, but most pancreas injuries, if they're isolated, there's no fatal outcome. They are, a lot of times they're not even subjected to surgery. They watch them in the hospital, let the pancreas heal, and then they go home. If there's polytrauma, a lot of other injuries along with the pancreas, there can be some morbidity and mortality, but most pancreas isolated injuries are non-fatal.
Now, you mentioned pain. Would this type of injury be painful?
Yes, they're painful. These kids that have bicycle injuries or other typical accidental mechanisms of pancreas injuries or liver injuries, they're painful, and that's how they present to the hospital with abdominal pain.
And you also mentioned the term polytrauma. Would Layla fall into the category as having polytrauma regarding her abdomen?
Layla definitely falls into the category of polytrauma, not only as it relates to her internal injuries, but also her external injuries. There's trauma, extensive trauma, externally and internally, so she is in the category of a child with polytrauma.
You also mentioned that she had damage done to the mesentery, correct?
I think you mentioned that.
Okay.
She does.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 458. What are we looking at in States 458?
So the mesentery is just all of the supporting tissues of the intestines. The intestines, obviously you know the intestines to be prolonged tubular structures. That's where all of our waste goes through. But they're not just hanging loose. They have all this supporting structure. So it would be similar to like thinking of all the webs between your fingers that hold the intestines together. It's called the mesentery. So I have lifted up the large intestine, and all of this soft tissue that connects it together is called either the mesentery, or as it relates to the large intestine, the mesocolon. These are lacerations in that tissue. It should be all one piece. So these are the tears from the trauma. This is all the blood, so there's bleeding into the mesenteric tissues and tears. And one thing with the bleeding internally, I collected 150 fresh blood, but then there's all this blood just in the soft tissues that you can't collect that and squeeze that out. So she's got a lot of bleeding in the soft tissues, and she had the fresh blood that's all just loose in the abdominal cavity.
Now, is the mesentery, is that part considered part of the small intestine?
Yes, it's considered part of the small intestine and also the large intestine as well. Typically, with the large intestine, we use the word mesocolon, but both of those are the supporting structures of the intestines.
Now, I want to talk about when this polytrauma was inflicted. What would be the signs and symptoms that someone around the child would have seen?
The injuries that Layla has are in the category of non-impact injuries. The one impact injuries are most significantly to the abdomen. And so as I talked about before, she has a liver laceration. She has lacerations of all the supporting structures of the small and large intestine. She has her pancreas transected. This would cause abdominal pain. So it causes abdominal pain. It's not going to cause immediate death because that's just the nature of abdominal trauma. You're not going to die immediately just because your liver is lacerated. You can still walk. Nothing has injured that, but you're going to have a lot of abdominal pain. Over time, as this bleeding starts accumulating, that's when you're going to start having the signs and symptoms of losing blood. You're not getting enough oxygen to your brain. So that's when the seizures, your body's basically starting to go into shock. And that's what shock is. Your body is going into shock, it's losing blood, you become pale, and then as in the description that I talked about, the description of Layla moving her arms and legs at the table, and her head going back, and her eyes going back into the back of her head, those are the symptoms that she's having of having this abdominal trauma. She's losing blood, she's been injured. And so now she's going into shock, she's starting to die, she's having this choking type thing. It's not because of a foreign body or a piece of chicken in her airway, it's her choking and not breathing and having a seizure because she has abdominal trauma.
Now, as far as I know you mentioned a little bit about the timing. Do you believe, when in relation to her death, do you believe that this type of injury would have been inflicted?
Within about an hour. Could be a little, give or take maybe some minutes, hour, 50 minutes, 40 minutes. I mean, you can't be exact. But of course, as I've already mentioned, parts of her body are already starting to heal. She has neutrophils in the liver already. So this just didn't happen 10, 15 minutes ago. The body has been injured. It's starting to heal. All the cells in the body are saying, hey, I've been injured. Let me get there and try to start healing you, liver. And so that's what's happening. So we're talking about a little bit of time. And then, of course, we're talking about the time for her to then eventually start having the symptoms of her losing 15% of her blood volume. And then, so that takes a little bit of time, at least probably half an hour.
And types of things that you mentioned, a stomp and a kick or a punch, these are types of things that could cause this type of injury, correct?
Yes. Force or punch her abdomen, a stomp. Given all of the injuries that she had, inclusive of her back and her head, we would be considering that she didn't just have one single impact that caused the extent of all of her injuries involving the entirety of the body.
Now, in the abdominal area, we actually don't see any bruising in that area, correct? On the external part of the body?
For the most part, obviously we saw some of the bruises on the lower abdomen, the right and left sides, and on the side of the hip and the pubic area, but at least right in the middle where the liver would be, as you saw in the diagram, no, there wasn't any bruising there.
And is it unusual not to find external bruising in the abdominal area?
So that's not unusual at all. Very frequently, when you have liver lacerations, which are a lot more common than pancreas injuries, it's quite interesting and fascinating that you don't see any bruising on the outside, and that's because of the phenomenon of the skin itself that compresses and injures the internal organs, whereby the skin, because it's stretched all the way in, you're not causing the blood vessels of the skin to be injured. So a bruise you can only see when the small vessels just in the skin break. With the abdomen, once a punch or a stump comes through the skin goes all the way in, the organs inside are injured, but the skin vessels are not. So that's quite common to have very significant internal injuries of the abdomen with liver lacerations and not have the external abdomen appearing to have a bruise.
We've talked a lot about protected areas. I'm showing you states 475. Is the pancreas considered to be a protected organ?
Yes.
And why is that?
Particularly given it's behind the stomach, it's behind the head of it is a little bit behind the liver. It's over the vertebrae that kind of protects it because the bone protects it there. It's the very specific type of impact in the epigastric area that's going to cause the pancreas to be injured. And so they're not injured frequently, at least it's not in my experience to see many pancreas injuries outside of very significant force directly in that area.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned we talked about some of the other organs. The spleen, is the spleen actually more likely to get injured than, say, the pancreas?
Yes, the spleen is more likely to be injured than the pancreas. The spleen sits in the upper left side of the body, and it's kind of just still underneath the skin. So you don't have bone over it covered in. The spleen is one of the more common organs that is injured in traumatic cases, whether we're talking about motor vehicle accidents.
Now, as far as Layla's nourishment, did you ever make any finding regarding whether or not she was malnourished or anything like that?
No. One of the things that we do at autopsy is obtain the height and weight. That's part of the autopsy procedure. Layla's weight was in the 10th percentile. Her height was in the 90th percentile. I haven't calculated that body mass index, but that would be in the most likely the general range of a normal body mass index. It's not outside of her being like less than 30 percentile or something like that. So.
Okay. Now, the adrenals, did you find any, well, first of all, what are the adrenals?
The adrenals are endocrine organs. They make enzymes, and they sit right above the kidneys. So you have the kidneys, and on each side there's an adrenals, sort of a flat organ that sits right over the adrenals.
Did you find any evidence of trauma to the adrenals?
Not specifically to the adrenal itself, but there was hemorrhage or bleeding around the adrenals, and that was just reflective of the fact that she had abdominal trauma, significant abdominal trauma. There was a lot of bleeding in the abdominal area, and the soft tissues around the adrenals had bleeding around it.
Now,
And I don't know if that was both adrenals or one or the other. I'd have to look.
showing you states 463. Did you make any findings regarding the heart?
Yes, I did.
And if you can orient us, where is the heart on the screen behind you?
In this photograph, this is the heart right. So what I found on the heart was this injury that is in the photograph and also one that is not in the photograph. What we see in the photograph here, this is obviously the front part of the heart. This is a small area of bleeding into the surface, just a very superficial surface of the heart.
Okay. Could that injury in and of itself possibly be consistent with a CPR?
Now, this is in fact an injury that we may see with CPR, whether that be in a child or in an adult, because it's, number one, is very small amount of bleeding around it. And this would be reflective of the fact that in CPR, you're dying, your heart is not beating very fast, but you're trying to pump the blood in the heart. So with chest compressions, you may cause a break in the blood vessel. Since there's not any very significant blood pressure because you're dying, you see very small bleeding around it. And so that would not be unusual to see in CPR. Not like what we saw in the liver and all the hemorrhage or bleeding that we saw in the mesentery. That would be quite inconsistent with a heart that's not beating very well.
And did you also make any findings regarding the diaphragm?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you 461. What are we looking at here?
In the top of this picture here, this is the photograph of the lung. And so the diaphragm is the muscle that separates the chest cavity, the heart and lungs, from everything in the abdominal cavity. This is, we refer to either as the dome or the leaflet of the diaphragm. Looking at the top portion, it's a muscle, so this is what it kind of generally looks like. All of this is bleeding, so bruising of the diaphragm. So that's where all the injury is that involves the diaphragm.
And would this be an injury that you would expect to see from CPR?
No, sir.
Or the Heimlich?
No.
Did you also examine the bones in her body?
Yes, I did.
And as far as the right ulna, the left ulna, did you make any findings?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
Number one, the one thing that we did at the time of autopsy, which is quite the normal practice in child autopsies, particularly of a certain age, typically under 1 or sometimes under 2, depending on what we see, is to do full-body x-rays. So full-body x-rays were done on Layla. I saw those before I started. And so in the x-rays, I did identify that she had a fracture of the left ulna as well as a right tibia. So then at the time of autopsy, to further evaluate that fracture, I removed the bone.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been entered as 467.
And so this is after I have removed this injured bone. You can see the fracture through there. And I took samples of that to look at on the microscope. This was a healing fracture of the bone.
Now, just so we're clear, this is the arm bone? That the ulna is in the arm, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you said that you did a microscopic examination of this injury?
Yes, I did.
Now, what did you find when you did a microscopic examination?
What I found when I did a microscopic examination was that the bone was, I would refer to it as advanced healing. I started to see new bone already. So when a bone heals, again, the body wants to heal itself. I didn't have any indication that, I don't believe that this was a bone that had previously been known to have a fracture. So the body is trying to heal the bone itself. First, you're going to start having more cartilage laid down, and then the bone is going to start to form. The bone initially is like very immature bone, and then you start seeing a mature bone, and then the body will heal itself into a normal bone. At the stage that I saw this fracture in, I'm already seeing the immature bone, so it's quite advanced along the way, probably at least a couple of weeks.
Now, on the back end, would you expect this fracture to be, say, several months old?
No, sir.
And why is that?
Well, in a 2-year-old, most of the bones should be completely healed, even without any medical attention, in about a month or a couple of months. The body is going to just completely heal the bone.
In a 2-year-old, if several months had gone by, could you not even see any signs of the fracture ever being there?
If it's several months, you potentially may not, but it kind of really also depends on what bone it is, and if there's a lot of movement of the bone, it may heal completely, and where at least if you look at it in a microscope, it looks like mature bone and it's fine, but sometimes if people don't have bones casted, there may be a deformity of the bone. So it kind of all depends on how much movement and whether there's going to be a deformity after it's completely healed.
I want to talk to you about the right tibia. The tibia is in the leg, correct?
That's correct, one
And
of the lower leg bones.
did you also do a microscopic examination of the tibia?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
The tibia as well had what I refer to as advanced healing. There was immature bone already present. So it's along the advanced stage where it's healing to the point of maybe in the next few weeks it would have been completely healed.
All right. Did you make note of any other fractures that Layla had?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
I found a healing fracture of one of the right ribs. I believe it's the eighth. It's confirmed. Yes. I found a healing fracture of the right eighth rib.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as stage 468. What are we looking at in stage 468?
What we're looking at here we can see the ribs on the right side. The ribs, when you look at them, they're kind of flat. I mean, they're bone, of course, but they have this flat, smooth appearance if you rub your hands along them. Here you can see a little nodular bulging of this rib. You see these very smooth. You come along here, this is towards the back side of the rib cage. This is posterior. You come along, you see this little bump. And then you get back to the smoothness. This little bump is where a fracture was. It started to heal, and this is what's called the callus formation of the fractured bone.
Now, is that similar to what you saw in the other fractures that we've talked about so far?
Yes, this was a healing fracture of the posterior or the back part of the right eighth rib.
Now, how does this type of fracture occur?
This type of fracture would occur by forceful squeezing, such that when you squeeze the rib cage, those ribs towards the back, you can fracture it. And if it's, the ribs just heal themselves. It's not like you put a cast on the rib or anything like that. So it heals itself, and as it goes through this progression of healing, it starts with the bones getting a little bit thicker, nodular, callous, and it'll smooth out over time, especially in a 2-year-old. It'll look normal after about a month or so. But at this point, it's in the healing stage.
Now, this is a posterior rib fracture,
Yes,
correct?
the back of the ribs.
Now, is a posterior rib fracture highly indicative of child abuse?
Posterior rib fracture is certainly something that makes one very concerned that the mechanism was very forceful squeezing.
Now, you talk about the timing. About how old would this fracture have been?
A few weeks.
You also took x-rays at the autopsy, correct? I think we've talked about that.
X-rays were taken. With the x-rays, we take the x-rays primarily to see what the bones look like. We also take x-rays in gunshot wound cases to look for bullets. In children, it's primarily for looking at the bones because we otherwise would not see them. In the x-rays, I did see the fracture of the arm. I saw the fracture of the leg. The x-ray, I didn't see the fracture of the rib. It's only the one in the back, so that's why the autopsy is done. I'm able to see rib fractures a lot more just myself when I remove all the organs. So the rib fractures, when we don't see them in our x-rays, we're still quite confident that we will see them because we remove all the organs.
Dr. Darrisaw, I'm going to show you what's been admitted as stage 470. What are we looking at in stage 470?
What we're looking at here is, in this particular case, and in most child autopsies, particularly at younger than a certain age, in the removal of the organs, we take them out all in one piece. Most of the adult autopsies, that's one difference in the adults, is that you take out the organs just one at a time. Take out the heart and the lungs. With the children, take out everything all in one piece. So everything, her tongue will be up here with all of this taken out, You can see the lungs, the heart, the liver, see how things are all pieced together. So that's just what is referred to as coming here to lift up the stomach, which I did when everything was shown, when it was still inside the body. You have to lift all that up to be able to see that.
And on the back side, we're looking at stage 471.
And this is just the whole organ, complete organ block as it was removed, turned over. You don't see the pancreas here either. This is the diaphragm. You can see a lot of the bleeding here, just a few. And then, mind you, this is after everything's been cleaned up. After I've taken it out, I've cleaned it up. I'm not even clean. You don't even see blood in the background. But you can see the blood in the mesenteric tissues. Some of the blood, here's the diaphragm. That blood that you saw in the diaphragm.
Dr. Darrisaw, are you familiar with the Heimlich maneuver?
Yes, I am.
Okay. In your medical opinion, could the injuries that Layla sustained, or the injuries that Layla sustained had, are they consistent with the Heimlich maneuver?
The injuries?
Yes.
No, she had extensive injuries. Her liver is lacerated. Her pancreas is lacerated to the point that it's split in two, it's transected. She has multiple tears of the mesentery. She has bleeding in all the mesenteric tissues. She has contusions and bruises of the diaphragm. So no, it's not consistent with Heimlich maneuver.
Are you familiar with the case report, pancreatic transection as a complication of the Heimlich maneuver, a case report and literature review from 2007?
I am familiar with that case report.
And have you reviewed that case report?
Yes, I have.
And in that case report, what did that case report essentially report out?
That was a case report of an 11-year-old child. The father felt that the child was choking. He started doing the Heimlich maneuver, and then of course he called 911. Emergency medical personnel get there. The child was transferred to the hospital. After a short time in the hospital, I don't remember if it was still that same day or in the emergency room, he complained of abdominal pain. They did CTs and found that he had a pancreas transection. That was the only injury that he had, an isolated pancreas transection. And as much as there was immediate medical attention, he survived. He got out of the hospital a few days later. He did require surgery because his pancreas was transected. Had surgery and got out of the hospital.
Now, did the study discuss whether or not there can ever be complicated, or sorry, not the study, the case report ever discussed that there could sometimes be complications due to the Heimlich maneuver?
It did. The case report discussed that it was the only case in the world of a pancreas transection related to the Heimlich maneuver. Did indicate some other papers of Heimlich maneuver injuries that have been isolated case reports. None of them resulted in the death of the individuals. So
this case report is the only reported instance that you know of where the pancreas was transected. Was this the only case report that you are aware of?
It was the only case report that they were aware of, because that was in their discussion. They said this is the only known instance of a pancreas transection that we know of, and that's why they wrote the case report.
Did they make any mention about how common it is to have any kind of injuries from the Heimlich maneuver of any organ?
Yes, I mean, as in most case reports, you're going to have an introduction first. You're going to talk about. So in their introduction, they talk about the Heimlich maneuver, when it came about, how safe it is, even in the hands of inexperienced people, and that it's quite rare to have injuries. They give a little bit of a discussion about some other case reports in the literature of different injuries, and then they talk about theirs, again, as being the only known case of a pancreas transection in this 11-year-old child.
And did the case report note any other, let's just break down, did it note any bruising at all that was reported on the child?
No, sir. The case reported an isolated pancreas injury in this child.
What about fractures to the child?
No, sir.
What about the injuries to any other organ in the child's body?
There were no other organ injuries.
Did the paper also discuss the need to rule out child abuse?
Yes, it did. So the paper discussed that clearly this was something that is not commonly seen, a pancreas injury with Heimlich maneuver, and in the discussion gave the caution that, of course, in injuries like this, it's not expected at all to have this with the Heimlich maneuver, so that, of course, other alternatives for the way the child is injured would have to be evaluated and excluded.
Now, you've talked a little bit about knowing the statements that were given by Ms. Rosenbaum in this particular case, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain to us why the history that she provided would not be accounted for by this particular paper?
By this particular paper?
The paper that we were just talking about.
Yes.
Why the history provided by Ms. Rosenbaum wouldn't account for, take into account the injury that paper talks about?
Well, because it's very dissimilar from this paper. It's dissimilar age to begin with the age. Layla was 2, this child was 11. It's very dissimilar with respect to the injuries that were noted. In the paper, the 11-year-old child had an isolated injury of the pancreas. Layla has multiple internal injuries and extensive bruises on the external body, bruises that cover most of the back. She has head trauma. Layla has old injuries, broken bones. So there are a variety of differences in the extent of injuries that are seen here. And then thirdly, and I feel most importantly, is the outcome of what happened. With the 11-year-old child, his outcome was he lived. He got to the hospital because EMTs responded, and that's one of the things with trauma. When there's a very short period of time when there's professional response to injuries, even in motor vehicle accidents, the expected outcome is that that person lives. And so, yes, that child lived, whereas we're sitting here today because I did an autopsy on a child that died from extensive trauma.
In all of your experience, have you ever seen anything like the injuries that you've seen in Layla related to any sort of resuscitative methods?
No, I have not.
Dr. Darrisaw, what caused the death of Layla Daniel?
I certified the cause of death as multiple blunt impact injuries of the torso. I think those are the exact words I used. Well, in my actual cause of death, I didn't use the word multiple. And in my report, blunt impact injuries of the torso, but they are multiple.
What are the different types of manner of death?
The manners of death, there are 5 different categories of manners of death that we use. We use homicide when a person's death is caused by the action